cybersecurity, the only constant is change. So if you're ready to sit still, you're already 3 days behind.
My guest today is Vicky Pillitteri, a security leader at NIST, the organization behind many of the cybersecurity frameworks and standards shaping government and industry today. As AI accelerates, threats evolve, and compliance programs grow more complex, Vicky and the NIST team are helping define what modern cybersecurity should actually look like.
Ultimately, each of the security requirements in 171 and the security and privacy controls in 853, it's there to manage risk, right? You're looking for a good outcome that can have many different implementations, but a good security outcome that is tied to managing some sort of risk.
This conversation goes beyond checklists and certification culture into the harder question underneath all of it: how organizations understand and manage risk in the real world.
We are developing a series of control overlays for different types of AI systems. Systems have different risks, different threat vectors and attack vectors.
We also discuss AI security, continuous monitoring, and the future of cybersecurity assurance. And now, here's Vicky Pillitteri. So I have Vicky Pillitteri in front of me. And we're going to start by saying, who's Vicky Pillitteri?
Well, hi, I'm Vicky Pillitteri. I lead our security engineering and risk management group at NIST. I've been there almost 15 years, so which means I started when I was about 10 years old. In our research portfolio, the portfolio of this group is doing the research, developing the standards and guidelines that are used for cybersecurity and privacy risk management across all the federal agencies and voluntarily by private sector, industry, academia, nationally and internationally. I think a couple of the pubs that our group is most famous or infamous for include the NIST Risk Management Framework, the 853 Security and Privacy Controls, this little-known series of publications on protecting CUI that's used by this tiny little agency named DOW for their CMMC program and other research areas.
Let's just back up real quick. Let's just talk about NIST.
All right.
As much as you can talk about NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology. What is the NIST mission? Like, what does the institution do?
So we're a bureau within the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our mission is to advance measurement science. And before you ask, wait, what does that have to do with commerce? It all goes back to, if you can't measure it, you can't monetize it and sell it. So NIST has some really humble beginnings back into the early 1900s. The Great Baltimore Fire. Basically, all of Baltimore burned to the ground, and New Baltimore's on top of it. So when this fire happened, they called in fire trucks from all up and down the eastern seaboard, and they all came as quickly as possible. But when they arrived, their hoses couldn't attach to the fire hydrants, or that version of fire hydrants back then in the city. So even though there were the trucks and the people there, no fire, no water to put out the fire. So that's just one example of the importance of kind of measurement and standardized things that drive innovation, that drive the economy, that drive cities surviving.
Society.
Yeah, society. Well, we like it. So NIST's role in this space is to do the measurement science, which is a really sexy way of saying, how do we measure and quantify these things? So we have labs that do works in physics, materials measurement, engineering. I come from the IT lab, and our broad mission is to cultivate trust in IT. We probably are most well known for our cybersecurity and privacy portfolio. That has given you some publications like the Cybersecurity Framework.
Big fan.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in this space has heard of that before. The Privacy Framework and a whole host of other things.
So the publications I'm most familiar with are, of course, 800, 171, and 853. They're in that broader 800 publication set. Is that all the computer information security stuff?
We actually have a couple of different series. So we have the 800 series. We have Federal Information Processing Standards called FIPS. We actually only have a few standards. A fun fact is often when people refer to NIST publications, they call them all standards. We actually only have about 10, maybe a few less, FIPS that are technically standards. And those are ones that are mandatory and promulgated by the Secretary of Commerce. So there's your Jeopardy fun fact of the day. The majority of our technical publications in the cybersecurity, computer security, information security space fall in the 800 series, which are technically guidelines. And then we also have interagency or internal reports, which are even more technical guidelines. We have white papers, and I think those are all the big ones in that series.
There's first I want to shout out Ron Ross, who congrats on his retirement.
I am mad at Ron. We had a deal that I got to retire before him.
He jumped the gun there, I guess.
I know.
But you're largely seen as his successor, right? Especially when it comes to 853 and 800-171, which is
with much better hair.
Sorry, Ross. Ron,
Sorry.
I didn't say that. She said that.
He knows.
But that's big influential shoes to fill at a time where I think it's super important, right? Because cybersecurity, a thesis that I'll always put forward is like it's getting harder and harder and more important as more and more things are coming online. You have all the attack surfaces being created by IoT and critical infrastructure and everything else. I'm curious what sort of like principles you account for in your creating and cultivating of these guidelines.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, working at NIST is such a great experience because you have the opportunity to work with people and train under people like Ron. I can actually think back to the first time that I met Ron. He was giving a talk at a different agency and I got to go and I was like, oh, do I bring something for him to sign? This is the Ron Ross. He's like a celebrity. And, just the opportunity to get to work with folks like that. Probably not everyone is quite as well known as Ron, but we have such a deep bench of brilliant researchers, people that have experience in academia, other federal agencies, industry. So we get to work with them, do the research internally. But more importantly is the collaborations that we have with the external world. Listen, I get to work with really smart people. I think generally I might be the dumbest person in most of the rooms I sit in, which is a good thing. But we have the talent at NIST, and we have the collaborations through, other federal agencies, through our working groups and public forums. Every time we have a draft of a publication, we put it out for public comment. Yeah. So really, we get to reach into the best of industry, the best of academia, here and internationally, to help inform our standards and guidelines. When it comes to this work, as you said, cybersecurity, the only constant is change.
Yeah.
So if you're ready to sit still, you're already 3 days behind. So, using this reach, using this open process of collaboration and really reaching the best, we're able to try to provide the best set of standards, guidelines, technical principles for people to build off of. Good cybersecurity raises all boats.
Could you shine some light maybe on how a publication like 800-171 is iterated on? I understand it's already been created, but it's now on its third revision. When you move to a fourth revision, what does that process look like?
Are you trying to get a sneak peek on when Rev 4 is coming out?
We'll turn the cameras off if you want to tell me.
Everyone calm down. There's no timeline for Rev 4 quite yet. I'm not that mean.
But it's coming at some point, right?
Yes, at some point. Again, the threat continues to change.
Yeah.
Even as we look at information and the value of information within the federal agencies, that continues to evolve as well. And these are really critical factors to the standards and guidelines. I like to think of, 853, 171 as that roadmap, that guide that provides those outcomes, that allows for flexibility and implementation. I also like to think that we want to be steady with change. We're not going to, throw a curveball at a left field. That was the worst analogy ever. But we're not going to do changes for the sake of changes. But we really want to be strategic, making updates when needed, when directed by the administration through executive order, by the White House, whether it's based on, the latest research or a specific need. We'll make changes. We're not going to make them willy-nilly. So it's this balance of trying to find stability, because we can't just change requirements overnight and expect people to be able to implement them. Sure. And some agility. We've done some really cool work with 853 to provide this mechanism to both provide that stability, allow engagement with all stakeholders all the time, and still push out new revisions as needed. And 853 is important here because 171 is derived from the 853 moderate control baseline. But this tool is an 853 public comment tool. So anytime you're using 853, and even in this case, 171 Rev 3 and 172 Rev 3, if you have feedback on, maybe something's not right with this control, maybe you're missing something, maybe something's out of date, maybe we even have a gap in the controls, or you think something should change in the baselines, you can submit a comment to NIST anytime, 24/7. So if you think of it in the shower, you think of it while you're sleeping, in a dream.
That's where I do all my thinking.
And the happiest dream ever. You can submit that comment to NIST. We'll be able to queue it up, review it, adjudicate it, and save it for that next planned revision. This same tool gives us the ability to rapidly respond when directed to make updates. Just last summer, in a recent executive order, we were directed to update 853 to address secure software updates. We had some controls that addressed it already, but I think the White House was looking for something much more explicit. We were able to collaborate internally, collaborate with our interagency partners, and issue a draft proposal that met the needs of that executive order, have a 2-week public comment period that was open, available to anyone, adjudicate comments, and push a minor revision of 853 in less than 30 days. This has been unheard of in previous times. And the glory of this is we really just focus on the changes. So rather than putting out a very long, very robust and substantial PDF, we really only focus on what's changing or what we're proposing to change. This way, we focus our cycles only on the deltas, and we encourage our stakeholders to only focus on the deltas. This public comment tool also allows you to see the comments that other people submit, which is kind of cool. We're all about transparency. There's no secret sauce there. So understanding the feedback on how the community broadly is accepting it. And then we're able to push updates to the controls as a data set, not a PDF, as the primary mechanism for keeping this catalog up to date. And because 171 is based on 53, we can draw from that. We have plans for extending this comment tool to the 171 series. We do recognize that, again, stability with some agility is really the key thing.
Yeah, you use 2 words in there that I generally wouldn't, I'm not saying me personally, but you generally wouldn't hear people describe NIST as creating flexibility or agility.
That's fair. We do very thorough research, and we're a bunch of scientists and engineers. You want us to be thorough, but we also recognize, especially in this space, we need to be able to respond as well. So how do we take the best of both worlds?
Yeah, no, I think this is way more the recent changes you're talking about. This is where things seem to need to go. The iteration cycle of technology needs to be rapid.
And standards and guidelines need to follow that.
Yeah. I don't want to be critical necessarily, not of NIST. This isn't a NIST thing I'm going to throw at you. But I started my journey on NIST 800-171 in 2018 in earnest. The first time I was part of a company getting certified for it was 2025. It took 7 years, and I think that's not a failure of any one body there, but we have to recognize that 7 years in the current situation of geopolitics.
Well, that might as well be 100 years.
It is 100 years. We need to be able to move faster. And I know NIST, you guys can just create the standards and the guidelines, and then the agencies have to go out and implement them. One of the challenges I think has been people don't know if they're allowed to come to NIST and ask questions like, what did you guys mean by this control? And so it's created this whole industry where we're trying to fill gaps in what your intent was, and no one seems to come back to you guys. Because my impression has always been like, well, you can't really. They wrote it, they published it, they can't change it.
I mean, we can change it. We're not going to change it willy-nilly, but we can change it. And we actually do. We actually even have an mailbox that's manned by the researchers in my team and myself that takes inquiries. We generally answer questions about the intent. While we won't tell you how to implement the control, we are happy to clarify what we meant by it, kind of what's in scope, what's out of scope. We're not going to pick a solution. We're not going to provide recommendations on vendors or stuff like that. But yeah, we do have an email. It's sec-cert@nist.gov.
And I assume you don't want people to send hey, at my company, we're doing this. Do you guys approve?
I mean, people can send
I'm sure
whatever
they send-
emails they want, right?
They might not get a good
I can't
response.
stop that.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to comment on like, is this going to pass the assessment, because that's really going to be based on what the federal agency issuing the contract is. But we can definitely clarify the intent or what we were trying to what the desired outcome is. When you look at 171, 153, we're really just looking at good security and privacy outcomes, right?
Yeah.
How you get there is really going to be based on your context, based on your organization, your systems, the risk tolerance, what's expected for you in contracts, right? We can't answer that. Otherwise, we would have one single solution across every single enterprise, and that's probably not a good thing either.
Yeah, well, I mean, transparently, that's somewhat of how 800-171 is being applied in the defense industry, where it's the smallest company has to implement it, the largest company has to implement it. And unfortunately for the way I read the publication, as I have talked to folks at NIST, like the intent was never for it to be a checklist, but unfortunately it's like becoming used that way. You know what I mean?
I mean, unfortunately, I think a lot of NIST standards and guidelines are interpreted as a checklist.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks my heart just a little bit. We've intentionally built in a lot of flexibility because there is no one silver bullet. Let's look at the CUI series, the 800-171. So what is the whole purpose of it? It's to provide those security requirements to protect that federal information. So it doesn't matter if you're a huge defense contractor that has billions of dollars or a mom and pop shop with 5 employees total, and the CEO is the admin and is also the trash guy. The value of that information is still the same, and protecting it, the confidentiality of it is essential. So that's why this set of requirements exists. However, think about the scale and the scope of the implementation. That billion-dollar company probably has hundreds, if not thousands of people, hundreds of systems, hundreds of endpoints. And while that mom and pop shop probably only has one. So the scale of it is really going to make a huge difference on how you implement each of the requirements. At the end of the day, you're all in on all 110 requirements, because those are the requirements derived from the moderate baseline to protect confidentiality. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be perfection.
Yeah.
I think based on how CMMC and the DIBCAC scores things, different requirements have different weights. And you need to hit some minimum score in order to pass the assessment, right? So it's not looking for perfection. Where you have gaps, you have the opportunity to identify a plan of action and milestone and say what that gap is and how you plan to get there in the timely manner. And that's almost like a to-do list, because in the security world, there's always going to be a to-do list.
Yeah.
The only constant is change.
Yeah, well, and that I'm totally with you there. I think we in CMMC, the current model, and I'm not going to ask you to necessarily like comment on CMMC. I know that's the DOW's thing and has turned into its own sort of thing. But right now, level 2 it's like a 3-year time-based point-in-time capture, prove that this is happening. And I'm part of a lot of debate and discussion about that 36-month gap between times that you're essentially told to prove it. Mm-hmm. I think a more progressive approach to, I'm going to bring this back to like cybersecurity assurance. Like the whole purpose of this regimen of CMMC is to assure essentially the DoD buyer that the data that they're putting on your system is competently secured based on the way that NIST has described this confidentiality should be protected. We've built like this pass-fail test thing that happens every 3 years where people like get real amped up right for test time. They pass the test and they feel like, okay, we're done. We did it. We did the thing. Now back to what we were doing. And then they're going to do the same thing a couple weeks out from the big test again.
It's kind of like you floss extra well right before you go to the dentist. You're like really getting there.
Yeah, which, it's sort of like, it's an unfortunate thing where I think we sort of do this race to the minimum as an industry, as I think all industries do at the end of the day, but it seems to miss the intent.
I mean, one, it's kind of human nature, right?
Yeah.
We do what we are expected to do, sometimes better than others. I think the CMMC program fills a void in a space that didn't have this mechanism before.
Yeah.
Self-attestation has existed long before CMMC. So by having some certification program in place, it does create more accountability.
Yes.
So if nothing else, it's better than what was before. Now, the reality of a 3-year, point in time check is exactly what you describe, right? This is how federal agencies used to do security authorizations for their systems as well. It's a 3-year checkup. And sometimes, depending on the system, depending on the organization, depending on the system owner, you either stay at that level or things will, of course, fluctuate.
Yeah.
But I think the real big thing to emphasize is it's this CMMC implementation of any standards and guidelines from NIST is not a point-in-time thing. The whole goal is to understand the risk and manage that risk adequately. So something within your risk tolerance, or in the case of CMMC, the DOW's risk tolerance. So we really need to CMMC is a great starting point. I think there's an opportunity to really lean into that continuous monitoring to make sure that, we're staying good in that 3-year cycle.
Well, I like what you described around 853, where we're moving more toward a short rev cycle. We're going to work on deltas, right? It's not that we have to rewrite and
manage those deltas to a reasonable amount.
Right. And you have other more progressive things coming out like OSCAL. Taking a lot of this like manual human menial document writing for the purpose of having.
You don't like writing long SSPs?
I love a good SSP personally, but no. I would much rather have it machine sort of managed.
Well, that's really a big push for NIST based on both stakeholder feedback and kind of our own internal research. We were chatting before this and you mentioned the legacy or the saga of developing an SSP and,
yes.
The intent versus, what's actually happening. A really cool thing about OSCAL is it provides a standardized machine-readable format of those security controls requirements from 53 or 171 that allows it to be ingested into a GRC tool. And what does that mean? That means instead of writing essays about your favorite security requirement, which is?
My favorite, it's definitely not 31311, which would be the FIPS validated requirement. My favorite's probably 311's a heavy hitter, man.
I love the basics. Go back.
There.
It all starts with access control.
Surface, man.
So rather than writing, Word document SSPs or having all your security requirement implementations in some very complex spreadsheet, you can use a tool, a GRC tool to help manage. This way you can always keep it up to date. Ideally, at one point, we'd like to get to the point where you can use data from your SIEM, from your vulnerability scanners, whatever else you have in your organization, to feed data into your GRC to keep that security plan up to date without having to, rewrite your security plan. Because ultimately, it probably ends up being at least half of an FTE to manage a security plan in the POAMs manually, right?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the sort of line of questioning that I wanted to talk to you about today is like, your vision, you and NIST, for as much as you can speak for NIST as an entity, for what does good cybersecurity look like going forward? Like, what does good cybersecurity and assurance mechanisms look like going forward?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Well, I think you've already spoken to a piece of it, like OSCAL and simplifying.
Well, let's simplify. I think as we see AI everywhere, and I don't believe we've gotten this far and only said AI once, and it was me.
We'll spend time on that.
Okay. Well, as we see these capabilities, how can we leverage this tooling to make our jobs easier? Not to take our jobs, to make our jobs easier so we can focus on other things. How do we get rid of those manual things, tasks and activities that really it could be done better by code? So for OSCAL, for using GRC tools, we really want to cut down, from the NIST perspective, we really want to cut down that delta from when we issue the latest standards and guidelines because they reflect the current threat environment. And frankly, by the time we release something's probably changed.
Yeah.
Good thing is, our standards and guidelines are at that level of detail where it should stand the test of time. But we don't want further delay of organizations implementing the latest and the greatest. So I think it's about good cyber hygiene, doing the basics. They do cover a lot. right? Good access control, good identity
There,
management.
there are strong principles in there for sure.
You should be doing them anyway. So I would say to a lot of the smaller organizations, as they're getting overwhelmed when you see all the requirements and the process to go through CMMC or any kind of certification, is how many of these practices should you be doing anyways just to protect your company's information, your trade secrets, your personnel information? Because that all still has value as well.
I think you've said something important that I want to get you to repeat for effect. Which you talked about understanding the underlying risk that a control is addressing and understanding the intent and addressing them that way. So often I find in the compliance world, we really read into the words that NIST used as like must meet each letter exactly as written. There's this like very strict interpretation.
So is there a difference between employ and implement?
That's a good question.
You want to know a secret?
I would love
Sometimes we just switch up the words because I'm really sick of having employ 4 times in a row.
Yeah, no, but this is like, we will have debates in the ecosystem about that wording.
So I do appreciate the attention to detail, and there's so much value in having assessors that do really care about the details. But let's not miss the forest as we're looking at the trees individually. Ultimately, each of the security requirements in 171 and the security and privacy controls in 853, it's there to manage risk, right? You're looking for a good outcome that can have many different implementations, but a good security outcome that is tied to managing some sort of risk. And by making it a checklist, by being so focused on did I hit every single element, you're missing how does this manage our risk? I will say that if you have a good risk management program, you will knock compliance out of the park. But if you are compliant with pick a standard, any standard, pick a certification, any certification, can I really say that you're managing risks, or you just have that one gold star?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my lived experience in the ecosystem I'm in is everything just being reduced down to like, it's like this, again, just run to the minimum.
I mean, I get it, right? More often than not, especially if you're not a security company, security, privacy protection, it's a cost center. You're not going to see immediate profit from it. But it's like the whole idea of why do you have health insurance, right? You want it to have the protections, the resources available when and if. And it's not even an if, it's when something goes wrong.
Yeah, the point that I would make in all that is what you said, don't miss the forest for the trees, right? And we have this thing in compliance culture. It's like there's an element of gotcha, right? And it's minutia. I've seen so many people pontificate about this publicly. I've seen it in assessments. I've seen where an assessor gets locked in on like a very specific way of wording something and gotcha in somebody on like a phrase, instead of looking at like, hey, what's the whole picture here? Like, do they have good access control or not? I've seen companies get all hemmed up over like one little bit there. And what I'm kind of pressing for is like, that's clearly not your intent, right? The intent of NIST is not that we want a gotcha compliance culture necessarily. These are guidelines.
No, absolutely not. And that's kind of the reason why the security requirements are written at the level they are. There is obviously a difference between how they're phrased in Rev 2 versus Rev 3. But in general, we're still looking for that same outcome. I think Rev 3 provides a little more specificity to help with kind of implementers to, especially those that don't have strong programs in place already, of like, what are the baby steps that we need to take to get there? The challenge that you talk about with assessors and kind of the minutia, the focus on detail is real. I think the way that the assessment procedures are written are often misinterpreted as I need to check every single thing in this list in the order that it appears, rather than taking the approach of how do we optimize this assessment? If I ask something about identity management, inherently you're going to cover access control. You're going to probably cover some personnel security as well. Why not find out what those things that are related, group them in such a way, and knock them out all at once? It's very likely that the same artifact, and when I say artifact, I don't mean the same document. It could be like looking through your Active Directory. It could be looking through some kind of implementation or test. it could knock out multiple parts of different security requirements all at once. So rather than making it a, did I do everything in this list? It's, did I achieve this broad outcome? Here are the things that I've checked off by doing this outcome.
Yeah, no, that's so relieving to hear, right? Because
Too bad I don't do assessments.
Not yet, maybe. Hey, all said, like one of the frustrations, I'm a practitioner. I'm a IT sysadmin by trade and cybersecurity practitioner, and sometimes the assessment objects are asking us to decompose a system in a way that it really shouldn't be decomposed because it's a system.
Absolutely.
Right, like breaking things out into 15 different objectives and then describing them one by one when you're like, hey, can I just describe to you the holistic thing we're achieving here? Like how this is addressing the broad risk. Like, let me just describe how we do access control across the whole information system is the way we should be talking to each other, not...
It'd be way more efficient, I can tell you that.
Way more efficient, but I also think as an assessor, because I do both, as an assessor, I'm way more interested in understanding how the whole system operates and having a conversation that, like, as you said, shot for shot, objective by objective, doesn't create understanding in the same way as let's have a conversation about your whole approach here. Mm-hmm. And let's have a conversation about the risk that it's addressing. And then I can go look at my list of assessment objectives and compare, like say, okay, cool. Did I cover this?
Did we hit this list?
And it's a great thing to go back to and say, oh, okay, we didn't talk about this. Can we go back to that? Can you guys spend some more time on that?
It would probably be a much more efficient and probably a more pleasant assessment.
Yeah, I think this would be a absolute net win for people to understand that, at least from your all's intent, and let me know if I'm reading too far into what you're saying here, but in your all's intent, like we're trying to create good cybersecurity hygiene. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to create onerous checklist affairs. We're trying to create incentive and intent for you to create a good cybersecurity program.
Absolutely. And I would even argue a lot of these practices in 171 are good cyber hygiene for the organization as a whole. Protecting the confidentiality of your information broadly is probably good.
Can I ask you what your thought is on this, that the prevailing architectural model that's coming out in the DIB that I see is enclaves.
Okay.
People are creating enclaves for which they can relegate those security practices, and then they're saying, we don't have to do it anywhere else. Just it's all going to be centered right here.
I mean, different approaches work for different folks. An enclave could be a very cost-effective solution and a way to really understand where that information flows. It's going to be a practitioner organization decision on the cost benefit, of doing an enclave or just applying it broadly. I think the benefit of enclave is you always know where your CUI is.
Yeah.
And that's just one less thing to worry about. Now, broadly, you should have good security requirements in place across the enterprise anyways. Yeah. So if you just have a special place for your CUI, that might not be the worst thing. It's probably easier for smaller organizations that don't have the resources and don't have, a specialized IT department or a specialized security person to really isolate that as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad approach. I think I even read this past week, was it Army that had
Army Encode.
Army Encode had I don't think it's a grant, but a contract to help create a secure cloud, I guess, enclave for small and medium businesses to use. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is I've seen that be like it becomes the starting strategy because it's understood to be the cost effective. And part of this is what I thought the intent of like CMMC has been. I understand the confidentiality of CUI is what the standard is written to address, but it's also trying to create cybersecurity maturity in an organization. Like having an incident response program is not necessarily a confidentiality only capability.
Well, so
it's about other things too.
But confidentiality and integrity are very tightly coupled.
Yes.
Generally, when you're implementing a security requirement or control to protect confidentiality, you're also protecting the integrity. Think of FIPS using
cryptography does both.
Crypto does both. Now, availability obviously is scoped out intentionally, and that one's a little bit easier to break apart. But that's also pretty important too. Depending on what the system or the information does in your context can be very valuable. So outside of the 171, these are good security practices should just be implemented anyways for the sake of business, right?
Yeah. Part of what I see is some companies are deciding to like over optimize for like an enclave, and then they're forgetting like, hey, you might be a manufacturer. Availability of your systems is a major problem.
That would be the primary concern in the manufacturing world, frankly.
Right. And so not having a lever to be pulled there, they kind of over optimize for the enclave. It's kind of what I'm seeing. And I'm trying to warn everyone like, hey, that's a great starter approach, but let's not lose the fact that a lot of the problem is, like ransomware taking down manufacturers. Yes, we want to protect the data. We don't want foreign adversaries to get that controlled data, but we also really want you to be able to get the parts out the door that go into the weapons platform that go to the warfighter. And I think, DoD's use of just this one lever that they have right now with CMMC and 800-171 is not giving attention to broader cybersecurity maturity. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this kind of broadly talks about the maturity of kind of enterprise risk management in organizations broadly, right? There's lots of different types of risk beyond cybersecurity. There's privacy risk. There's business risk. Oh my goodness, business risk. There is reputational risk. There are all these different risks that inform kind of executive level decisions about that company. And sometimes we get so focused on one thing, we forget there's a whole host of other things that we have to deal with.
That's what I'm trying to help with now. Like I've been so focused on the 800-171 and the confidentiality. Now I'm not saying it's a solved problem, but we've spent enough time on it as a company and we've had enough success with them trying to come back around to the things we've been ignoring and saying like, wait a minute, let's not forget while we have an enclave that meets these requirements and we've solved like this short-term compliance problem, we still have to competently manage an information system that services a company that gets parts out the door.
How perfect. NIST has another guideline for that.
And that would be?
853, our security and privacy controls. It's a really robust catalog of outcomes that address cybersecurity, confidentiality, integrity and availability, cybersecurity for privacy, and cybersecurity supply chain as well.
Should companies be using 853 on top of 800-171 or in addition to?
I don't want to say should, but I think it's a really valuable resource. I'll tell a little story. So I didn't start out at NIST. I started in a consulting firm because I'm in DC and everyone works at a consulting firm. And while I was waiting for my clearance, on the first day, they handed me 853 in a very thick printout and told me to read it in my very cold office. I can tell you, I accidentally fell asleep. And I have told Ron this. He knows this will not be a surprise. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Without the context, without the experience, it's just a lot to consume. But it is a robust menu, a catalog of good cybersecurity privacy, CSCRIM outcomes. So ultimately, we want people to understand their risk. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Like being able to do a risk assessment, understanding what's important to you, what system, what information, what part of your business or your mission is the most critical, and really identifying how you protect it, how you pick those outcomes. I like to think of 853 now as a Cheesecake Factory menu. It has a little bit of everything for everyone.
Yeah.
If you want pizza, I want sushi, Elizabeth wants, pasta, we're all good. But no matter how large your party is when you go to the Cheesecake Factory, not endorsed by the way, you're never going to order everything off the menu. It would be expensive. It would be caloric. It would just be too much. Yeah. And that's how I like to think of 853. It has everything you need, but you got to pick out what you're in the mood for or what addresses those risks. So 853 is a great resource, but I also understand it can be incredibly intimidating. So the team has developed a series of online, self-paced, free, AKA already paid for, self-paced learning courses. So they explain the risk management framework. They explain the 853 controls, the assessment procedures and how to do an assessment, and the control baselines. So while not directly linked to 171, the 853A on explaining assessments and making them more efficient and that approach still 100% applies. And there's a whole bunch of these resources. Some of the 853 course are all like an hour or less. The 837 or the risk management framework one is, I think, like 2.5 hours, but really thorough, but also high enough level that it gives you some context before you try to dive in and, consume this really robust, this really meaty resource.
I'm going to defend you for a second for falling
Okay.
asleep having read that. So I fell asleep reading 800-171, which is a much smaller
It's much
document.
shorter. I'm really you need more coffee.
The first time I read it, it was more that I had a newborn baby at home. When I got this job, I got a job at a defense contractor, sort of started my whole journey and all of this. And my son was born 2 days before I had to start this job. And I came in and it was like, hey, do all the IT things. And also like, we are supposed to do this 800-171 thing.
fun.
Can you figure it out? Like other duty is assigned. And it set off this whole sort of journey. So that's my excuse for having fallen asleep.
That's
the
pretty.
first time I
That's
sat down
pretty
to read
legit.
it. Yeah. You said 800-171 is derived from 853, and I want to pull on that a little bit. We're going to get a little technical here. Does that mean if I have a question about what 800-171 says, and I can link the 171 control to the 53 control, that I can logically leap to say, well, whatever 53 says is what I actually need to do?
So 53 does kind of have a broader scope. Like I said, 171 is focused on confidentiality, and 53 also addresses integrity and availability. However, we also tried to in addition to tailoring down the requirement itself to only focus on confidentiality, we also tailored down the discussion, that additional context, the tips and tricks, the kind of some include examples. We also tried to tailor that down as well. If it would be valuable to organizations, they can, of course, go back to 853 and see that broader picture of what risks we're trying to manage with that broader control and help use that to help inform, what your 171 implementation looks like. Also, don't hesitate to reach out. Literally, we try to respond to things within a week as we're able to, and we always try to follow up. So, we are a resource here because we really do want, again, our goal is to raise all boats in cybersecurity.
Let's talk about AI.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just ask you a very broad question. What's your take on AI and what's NIST's sort of effort on AI look like?
We have some pretty exciting work at NIST broadly through our CASE, the Center for AI Standards and Innovation, and through our Information Technology Laboratory and across all of the other labs. I think AI is here, and we have to figure out how to effectively and securely leverage its capabilities. Specifically in the security space, we have the Cybersecurity Framework AI profile that's being developed. I guess it's May now. There's just been a series of working group meetings that are open to the public to kind of provide comments on the different parts of that cybersecurity framework profile. We're hoping for a draft to come out sometime, following those meetings. In the 853 realm, we've also gotten a lot of feedback that cybersecurity framework profiles are really valuable, but provide that really high-level guidance, right? It explains those higher-level risks. It really speaks well to kind of non-technical people that are a little technical, they know enough to be dangerous, but implementers need additional guidance. They need something a little more in the weeds. So in response to this, we are developing a series of control overlays for different types of AI systems.
Okay.
So broadly, different types of AI systems have different risks, different threat vectors and attack vectors. So what predictive AI systems are vulnerable to is going to be very different to the set of risks and what you're looking to protect for, say, an agentic AI system. So we're developing a series. It's going to be, I think, 4 overlays, one on predictive AI systems, one on generative AI, one on agentic AI, and a volume on AI for software developers. So we're really excited. We've kicked off this work, I think, right before the shutdown last year. We put out an annotated outline in January of this year, held a public workshop to discuss kind of our game plan, and are working on the first 2 volumes. Our development methodology, so explains the method to the madness and allows users to further tailor based on our approach, each of the overlays, and the predictive AI overlay. Hopefully, if all goes well, we'll have something out this summer, and then we'll be partnering with the NIST CASE team to work on an agentic AI overlay next. So really excited. We're going to put out this series throughout this year. If all works out well, we'll have everything done by about this time next year and issued as final. But we're going to hold each of the volumes as draft until we finish them all, because I think there's some great opportunities to refine and, improve the past volumes based on lessons learned as we go on.
Can you speak to any of the principles that you're trying to enshrine in those standards and guidelines?
Well, one thing is, NIST always gets a lot of feedback. 853 is so long. I get it. So one of the assumptions that we're using in the development of this overlays is the organization does have some kind of cybersecurity and privacy risk management program in place, right? You have a governance model, you have policy and procedures. We're not going to rehash something that you should plausibly have in place for your kind of enterprise IT. Another assumption that we're making is, in this case, AI is just really fancy software, right? It's fancy.
More or less, yes.
It's fancy software. Yeah. It has a lot of capability, but also, as such, it shares a lot of common risks, a lot of common threats and vulnerabilities as enterprise software. So we're not focusing on that.
Yeah.
The intent is to make each of these overlays as lightweight and focused on the unique threat vectors to that type of AI system as possible, because again, we want to make this usable. At the end of the day, I think the Gen AI, the Pred AI, and the Gentic AI are kind of really written for the organization, acquiring or implementing this AI. Ultimately, people are going to be buying products, software, solutions that have AI embedded, right? And they need to know, and they're not going to be doing any of that development, but they need to know what to ask that vendor or that organization they're buying this solution or tool from. Are you doing these security practices because I care about this information? I care about how my information is being used to train models or not. I care where this is, stored, or how long you get to access this information. And then we'll have a separate volume really focused on developers. What are those considerations as you're developing AI?
I think that's a great dispelling of a myth you just did there, right? Because AI feels like magic, and so it feels like it should be all new attack vectors.
I mean,
really
it is
not.
kind of magic sometimes.
It feels like it, right? And when you get down to, I guess, like large language models, it is somewhat magical. You put things in, the weights do their thing, and something else comes out.
It's a very black box process.
Yes,
from
exactly.
the end user perspective, right? I ask it to do something, some magic happens in the background, and I get some kind of answer at the end.
But the threat vectors aren't really any different. Like, look at
in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Right? There are some considerations for AI that we wouldn't have considered in, say, traditional enterprise IT. Right?
Can we talk about some of those?
Let's think about the model weights. We don't really know. We don't know what the training data is, how this is trained, or how my data is going to train future iterations of this.
Right. You don't know what biases are in the weights.
Nope. I mean, it's a very black box. So just considering what those potential impacts on the output and how we'll use the output are really important, right? That you wouldn't necessarily have in any traditional enterprise software, because you put in one input, it does its thing, and you get the same output. You
see the code at some level.
You would get the same output if you put in the same input, right? In AI, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, it's baked into most large language models, right? That there's parameters you can set so that it doesn't always put out sort of the same thing. But where the threat vectors are largely the same, or some of the things you brought up, like it's just fancy software in that. Things like OpenClaw made the news, and everyone was like, this is a security disaster. Only because people broke principles of like least privilege necessary. And they just said, like, let's just give this thing access to all my email. And yeah, unsurprisingly, it sent out a lot of like spam emails because it's a black box that you just said, here, have access to everything. But that was a privilege control problem. That was an access control problem, not an AI problem.
Yeah, the same good security hygiene, good security programs have all these things in place. Would I just let you have access to all my emails? Right. Maybe I'd let you. I mean,
I'm trustworthy.
It's fine. Sure. Everything's
I would love
fine.
to know when Rev 4 is coming. So I would like those emails.
There have been no, to be very clear, there have been no emails about Rev 4. We're still finalizing 172 Rev 3. I got to get fine. Rev 3 out the door first.
One of the things that I see clearly through our conversation is you keep coming back to risk. You just keep on coming back to like, hey, companies need to understand their risk, whether it's an AI risk, whether it's a data confidentiality and availability. There's no getting around the fact that you have to build an understanding of your risk, and you probably have to have a program to manage that.
Absolutely. I mean, 100%, right? And the risk is really going to be unique to each company, each organization. It's like saying that there's one set of security controls that works for every federal agency. Well, I hate to break it to you. The mission of NIST, we do research. Our goal is to disseminate things and share all of the best practices. Our mission and our goals are going to be very different than, say, the Department of War. We don't have some of this very specialized equipment that blows things up like them. And that's by design. So really, each organization really has to understand what their risks are, what's important to them. And that's really going to be context specific, right? NIST doesn't have the answer specific to you. We provide you that 75, 80% solution of these are all good things. This is our approach to how you pick what's good for you, but you have to go and pick it out yourself. I really like to think of it like the controls and the requirements, like you go buy a shirt, right? Small, medium, large, it'll more or less fit. But to really get that good fit, the one that you really look good in, you got to have, this part taken in or this part let out. You got to tailor it. And that's the same approach to security. There is no such thing as a one-size-fit-all solution. There's a lot of good cyber hygiene that looks good on everyone, like sunscreen. But you still have to take it that extra mile to really make it work for you. Otherwise, it would be like just, sharing shoes with someone. That's probably not going to work.
Yeah, like you could still go on a walk. You could still wear them, but it probably wouldn't be super comfortable.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't match your outfit, priorities.
Yeah, and you do have to look good to perform good, So I do think that's just important to reiterate, especially to an audience that's in like the CMMC ecosystem, especially the assessors and that type. Like, people want to distill this down into binary truths. They want to say either it's 0 or it's 1 for every little thing. And that's not necessarily achievable.
And I understand how they got there, right? In our guidelines, we talk about, each of the assessment procedures, each of the assessment objectives is either satisfied or other than satisfied. And I think the next logical step is to break it down, take that whole list in 800-171, every single assessment procedure, and say yes or no. But really, when you're so focused on those little details, are you really missing the bigger picture? Because I think the bigger picture really colors the context on how those requirements are implemented, why they're implemented the way they are, and how implementing other requirements or other features provide that same outcome without having to explicitly say, well, I did this to meet 3.1.1.a.
I think that can be a pretty freeing perspective for people to hear, because a lot of people want to have the informed conversation, the risk conversation, but some of them might feel their hands are a little tied by a very strict interpretation of your intent.
Mm-hmm. So it really does come back to intent, and that's why we do try to be as accessible as possible to answer some of those questions.
What's your take on if I said that compliance does not equate with security? How would you feel about that statement?
I don't 100% agree. I say compliance can be necessary. I think it gets people to a great starting point. But if you stop at, I got my CMMC, I am compliant with XYZ standard, that's the floor.
Yeah.
If you have a true, strong risk management program, if you really understand and are managing the risks to your organization, not just in the security world, just broadly, you will achieve all that you need in compliance and then so much more. I'd like to think about it this way. So say you signed up for something through a company and you gave them all sorts of your personal identifiable information. If they come back and say, oh, we lost your PII, but we were compliant with whatever.
Great. That doesn't help me.
Are you any less mad? Yeah.
I might actually be more mad.
But if someone comes back and say, we did all of these things to try to manage the risks, we met these laws and requirements, but we also did this, but something still happened. At least it gives that perspective, right? It shows people are going above and beyond. Compliance is the floor. Risk management is really where we want to be. Risk management is that continuous, ongoing process. Compliance often is a point in time.
Risk management can be kind of an esoteric concept or topic.
Fair.
But my question to you is where should people start? Like if someone's a small business owner or a business leader, they're just not super familiar with all this stuff that we're talking about. And they hear it, they're like, yes, I understand. I need to understand my risk. What are the tools? Where do I start?
Ooh, that's a hard one. Well, first, it's understanding what your mission is, what's important to you. Then from there, at least from a cybersecurity, IT security perspective, what are the systems that house that information? What are the types of information that are important? And what are the threat vectors to those systems? And then look at what are the things that I can put in place to try to protect against those potential bad things.
Should they pick up 837 just cold and go?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We actually have, we've been partnering with our small business cybersecurity project lead within NIST, and he's been reading our publications blind. He's not a SME in risk management, but smart, sharp. So he's been reading various publications and doing a first cut at quick start guides focused on small businesses. And I love this perspective because, he's like any smart small business owner, cares, right? Enough. We want to get interested, but translating the often very academic, very, industry specific terminology that you and I love to use and all of our great acronyms, and turning it into plain English, breaking down those foundational concepts. So he's done, and then, working with the SMEs, me and the team, to make sure that the concepts are right and tweaking it. So it's that perfect blend of how do we make a very technical, a very robust resource manageable at first? How do we, help someone dip their toes in? So he's done quick start guides on the risk management framework, 837, which kind of talks about that risk management methodology and process. He's done one on 800-171.
Yep.
And we actually were able to kind of give a few of our friends and family that are small businesses sneak previews and let them give us feedback to help refine. And right now, he and I are working on one for 171 Alpha. So hopefully coming to a NIST website near you soon.
Here's hoping. Let's talk a bit about you, if we can. Let's talk about why you're at NIST, because you mentioned you started in private industry as a consultant. And I generally find, I talk to a lot of people who have been in government, who have transitioned out to the private sector, or vice versa, who've kind of sat in both roles. And I'm always curious what keeps somebody in the public sector.
It all ultimately comes down to mission. NIST does something that truly a private sector company cannot do, right? Develop standards and guidelines that advance everyone. We have no equities in your company or another company. We want you all to do well, and we want to provide those resources. So it's really the mission. It's the ability to work with really great people that are bright and love their job. It's the ability to help serve the mission of the other agencies and just broadly, the U.S. companies in general. Good cybersecurity is good for everyone.
Yeah.
It's a pretty unique and really fun job. I get to engage with folks like you. I get to talk about our really exciting work, and I get to learn from you all. Understanding how practitioners are leveraging our resources is so important to making them better, making them more usable, making them ready for what's next.
Do you feel the pressure of the fact that the publication that you're leading has such a far reach into this massive ecosystem?
Sometimes I'd prefer not to think about it.
I know. Did I just make you aware of something?
Oh no.
Just surface that.
Again, I think it's really ultimately, not to sound cheesy, but it is a call to service. Let's be very frank. Not all of us would do well, enlisting and serving in that way. But I see this as a way that I can actually make a valuable contribution and serve all of our stakeholders. Working with someone like Ron for all those years before he retired, it just shows that dedication to your country, to helping others in your own way. And, I'd love to try to make half the impact that Ron has in his career.
I think you've got plenty of time.
What? No.
Did you say you started when you were 10?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, no, tons of time.
Do you think if you went back and showed younger you what your career looked like, you'd be surprised?
Probably. I still go back to that first time where I got to see the Dr. Ron Ross talk. Maybe he could sign 853. And now, Ron's a text or phone call away.
Did you ever get him to sign it?
No, actually, I have nothing signed by Ron. I'm really disappointed.
Yeah,
Ron, if you're listening to this.
You need to get like an 853, a nice printout, nice bind it very nicely.
No, just the cover. Save the paper, and then I'm going to frame it on my
sign
wall.
right next to that. But seriously, is this a career path that you expected to go down?
Absolutely not. So the funny thing is, I'm from the DC metro area, and I actually was a college intern at NIST. And I thought, based on that experience, it was great. I got to do research, and I wrote code modeling systems that, research probably isn't for me. That's why I decided, I think I'll go into consulting so I can see, a different lens on technical work. The irony is that, my consulting brought me back to NIST first as, a consultant. And then, I just really fell in love with the work and the projects and the opportunities. And I've been there longer than I'd like to admit at this point.
What was your background?
My undergrad's in EE. My grad work is in
electrical
engineering. And then my grad work was in computer science.
Now, outside of the things I'm familiar with, 853, 171, do you touch anything like CSF or the broader portfolio?
So when CSF was actually originally developed, I was part of that team to work on CSF, go across the country to all those workshops, engage with stakeholders, worked on that, worked on the original privacy framework. So yeah, I've been just on a couple of little things.
Right, you get your fingerprints kind of on everything.
Don't blame me.
No. Generally, I think everything you've talked about where I've seen your name appear, that publication has gotten better if it was a pre-existing one. Or CSF, I'm a big fan of. The CSF is a great, for me as a career IT sysadmin, trying to transition into cybersecurity, the CSF gave me a phenomenal framing for what the problems are that I'm trying to solve for. And I fall back on it all the time still.
It talks in plain language. And that's one thing. I love the risk management framework and this robust portfolio of technical guidelines that we've put out. But one of the shortcomings is it's technical people talking to other technical people.
Yes.
We already are really good at talking to one another. CSF really bridges that gap and really makes cybersecurity and privacy framework as well, and privacy accessible to the smart person that is, aware of the importance of it, but not ready to go into the weeds. And it really provides that valuable translation layer that I'm so thankful for, because that's how you translate to the executives, to that senior level in plain language that also you don't miss the importance of what they're trying to protect.
Yeah, no, it totally helped me in the boardroom.
It's also a lot shorter than RMF.
Exactly.
Not going to lie.
Like trying to talk to a boardroom, having that simple, at the time it was the 5 functions. Now I know we have 6, we've got govern, which I think is a good change. But having that accessibility of cybersecurity, I think is an important concept.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about how many devices we have on ourselves right now. Yeah, I don't even want to count. So cybersecurity touches each and every one of us, even if it's not, you're not doing cybersecurity for a company. What about thinking about how do you secure yourself, your information, your family, the privacy information at home? That touches every single one of us. I can't think of one person that doesn't touch the internet in some way.
Yeah.
Every single day, if not
every
constantly.
hour.
Constantly.
Yeah. Do you ever get concerned about the fact that everything is so connected and that you're becoming so reliant on it, and like the adversaries are getting so persistent? I said the word. They're so advanced and they're so persistent, and boy, are they threatening.
Perfect.
Do you ever get sort of concerned, or do you ever look at that and feel overwhelmed by that?
I mean, I don't think I ever thought about it that way. I think we just need to do the best we can to protect what we have, right? to understand what the risks are and make informed decisions. I mean, we do really good risk management in our day-to-day lives, even outside of cybersecurity. I drove here from Maryland.
Yeah.
I managed a
Sorry
ton of
about that.
risks on the way here. But we make these decisions. We continuously evaluate. We're doing a risk assessment every minute you're driving, right? Is this guy coming over?
Yeah.
Do you have a blinker on? Oh, I got a brake. You are continuously doing risk management in your day-to-day life, and you don't even think about it. Those same practices, those same approaches, that's the same thing we're doing in cybersecurity,
point.
but just in a very more technical specific area.
It's like the same. Yeah, you said this earlier. It's you start by understanding your mission. What are you trying to do? Oh, right now I'm trying to survive. And what are the threats to that? The guy merging in without giving a signal is a threat to that.
And you're continuously monitoring, like, you're watching even
Constantly
if you
got your sensors pulling in data.
Absolutely. And you're making those decisions. Those are all risk-based decisions, and you're accepting that risk by just getting in that car every day. We're doing risk management 100 times, even before you leave your house. So just apply that same approach to cybersecurity, right? It's the same approach.
I think you answered the question then. Like, where do you start? You already started.
You're already doing it. You're already an expert.
For every year you have lived, you're becoming an expert in risk management.
Absolutely.
So the tradition on our podcast is sometimes we get pessimistic about things, or we're just dealing with like large problems, right? And that can put like a pessimistic lens on things, but I'm an optimist, and I find most people are. So I always like to ask people in closing, where do you find optimism when you're working like these hard, challenging problems, or we're facing, geopolitical tension and the advancement of like this scary technology and AI? Where do you find your optimism?
I just have to believe that there are a lot of good, smart people that want to do the right thing. And there are way more people that want to do the right thing than otherwise. So if we all work together, use our collective, skills, expertise, we can get there.
It's a good way to end it. Vicky, is there anywhere you want to direct people or anything you want to promote?
Well, check out nist.gov/RMF to find our whole portfolio of risk management resources for cybersecurity, privacy, and cyber supply chain. Always reach out to us, sec-cert@nist.gov, and with your questions on any of our pubs, we'll redirect you to the right folks at NIST if not. And just leverage tools that are already out there. We've put a lot of work and thought into them, and we want you to use them. And even more, we want to hear feedback on how we can make them better. Let's get better together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Happy Friday.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Watchers. For more great content, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out our channel. We'll see you on the next one.